Okay, so welcome everybody to this exciting edition of Reserve Only. I'm Mallow and I'm here with Braden. We're both community members of the Reserve Project. We're here to discuss something outside of Reserve but very much connected to Reserve. Thanks for being here, or thanks for listening after we've recorded it and taking the time. We're scheduled for, I don't know, maybe 60 to 90 minutes, but if afterwards you've got some questions, certainly we can try and take those. So let's dive in. We are incredibly pleased to welcome today our guest, Garett Jones. He is professor in macroeconomics at George Mason University, author of 4 books: The Culture Transplant, 10% Less Democracy, Hive Mind, and lastly, which probably will have some bearing on our conversation today, the nicely titled Banking Crises, Perspectives from the New Palgrave Dictionary of Economics. More importantly, though, and the reason he's here today, he is chief economist at Blue Chip, which launches today and is the first stablecoins ratings agency, which is also a non-profit organization. For those of you with very good memories, Garett was present on the panel with Reserve at Davos in 2019. Welcome, Garett. So happy you could join us today and really excited to talk about Blue Chip.
Hey, thanks very much. It's really great to be with you on launch day.
Super excited. Okay, we're going to do this in our normal reserve way, and we're going to play tag team between me and Braden with our questions. So I'll kick off. Just so that people can set the backstory a little, can you tell us what your path to getting involved with a stablecoin rating agency has been and how it's tied in with your past experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, my dissertation long ago was on the Federal Reserve and how it controls interest rates. My first publication was about the Asian financial crisis. And I think the Asian financial crisis has a lot to teach us about the world of stablecoins. When you're a small country trying to run your own currency and keep it stable against the dollar, you face the same problem that stablecoins face, which is nobody really needs your money. And so the best way to make people trust your promises about your exchange rate is to have a huge pile of wealth sitting there. So, credible collateralization, as we call it, right? And so what the Asian financial crisis taught us is that if you get a lot of things right, but the market just doesn't trust you, you can still have a massive exchange rate crisis. Nobody wants to use your money anymore. It devalues quickly. And so the lessons of the Asian financial crisis really poured over to the world of stablecoins. So my involvement with Blue Chip, it grows out of my knowing Nevin. So last summer, Nevin got back in touch with me. We hadn't really talked much since the Davos meetings, actually, quite a few years before. And he'd said he'd been thinking about starting some kind of interest in the community about having ratings for stablecoins. That bonds are rated by groups like S&P and Moody's. Car quality and safety gets rated by organizations like Consumer Reports. And so why don't we have something like this for stablecoins? So Nevin brought a few of us together, three of us together, and this small team of three, myself, Ben Levitt, and Vaidya Palasena, we launched ourselves off last fall as the board members of Blue Chip, an independent stablecoin rating agency. So really what we're doing is we're trying to draw the lessons from mainstream economics and port them over with the knowledge of the crypto community into creating letter grades, A+ through F. So clear, transparent ratings so people can decide for themselves which coins look safer and which coins look too risky to recommend.
Really good. That very interesting. We might talk a little bit more about that later on, about just the general financial markets and their relevance to crypto, because that seems to be, I know a lot of crypto people think that it's an anathema to talk about TradFi, but humans are humans and they have to interact with one another. So the rules there are salient, shall we say.
Yeah. The lessons of economics apply everywhere. You have to figure out how they adapt to particular settings, but we know that every time there's a big pile of money somewhere, some people are going to try to come around and steal it. And that's what I call the stablecoin temptation, that any stablecoin project that has a big pile of wealth is going to attract people both inside and outside the org who will try to predate upon, to raid that wealth. Maybe it taking off 1% at a time, or maybe going for big grabs all at once. we've seen these kind of governance problems again and again through DAOs and through other methods. So stablecoins face the normal problems of human self-interest that are very difficult to solve.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Thanks very much for that. Okay, Braden, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Garett, for joining us. This is pretty exciting. So can you explain to us the criteria by which you will be rating the stablecoins? And if you could maybe put a little bit of emphasis on the temptation, how you guys can help store projects that might be removing the temptation abilities.
Yeah, so we use what we've a mechanism we've designed we call the smidge rating framework. It's just the word smidge where each SMIDGE, and each letter stands for something that we're helping to rate. But the heart of it is that there are two big factors, which really are what I said before. One is whether the coin is backed by a lot of collateral, whether it's has enough wealth to, in principle, be stable backing it. With the case of fiat coins, that's usually some version of, do you hold a lot of U.S. treasuries? And then the second part is different parts of governance. Can you trust these folks? And that shows up in many ways. With centralized coins, it shows up more in terms of looking at the management team, whether they're doxed, whether they have been involved in scandals, whether they're set up in under a legal system that has a low level of corruption. With decentralized coins, the quality of the voting methods turns out to matter a lot more. So there's two factors. We can really boil down all of the entire smidge rating framework at a very broad level to two factors. Are you backed by a lot of wealth? And do you have reasonable mechanisms in place to make sure that the wealth doesn't get predated upon, stolen, raided? And so, we spent months working out the guts of this, applying this. But I can say that this overlaps quite heavily with a mainstream bank rating method known as the CAMELS, CAMELS. The CAMELS bank rating framework started in the US, but it's used the world over. People who compare the two will notice the obvious similarities because these are perennial problems, right? Banks need a big pile of wealth, one way or the other, and then they need to make sure there are good controls in place so that wealth doesn't get raided. So by looking at those, by employing the smidge framework, looking into the guts of the company financials, but the history of the leadership, where it's headquartered, we're able to give ratings of A+ to F. And at launch, nobody's getting an A+, but there's one F and quite a few Ds. So there's a lot of room for improvement in the world of stablecoin governance. It really is mostly on the governance side where we give our advice. So we tell the weak performing coins, here's how to do better. It's right on our website, and people can download both our rating guidelines and the full details of each coin's report. Just download it for free in about 45 minutes.
That's very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. So it's literally open to anyone who has a stable coin. If you decide to rate them, the way you've rated them and the biases that you've taken on how they're set up are available for everyone to read. And that company themselves can just download it and see potentially how they could do better.
Yes, and like I said, with a lot of these coins, sometimes it's just a matter of having a credible audit, so that people can believe what you say about your reserves. So sometimes it's more delicate, nuanced. We try to give a short summary on the main page for each coin of how they can improve themselves, and then there's much more detailed information in the long PDF reports.
And would it make much of a difference if people were not trying to peg themselves to the US dollar? So, for example, if we took the yen, or maybe let's take a sliding scale of examples. Take the yen, for example, or take the Venezuelan bolivar. Are you going to rate something differently because of the underlying currency, or is stability the key?
Stability is the key. So one of the coins we're looking at that's already rated is a Euro tether, pegged to the euro. We rate two gold coins that hold their attempt to hold value against gold. So that's noteworthy. We're happy to rate anything that if somebody's making an empirical claim and we can get good enough data to credibly evaluate it, and if there's enough market share that is worth our effort, we'd like to let the world know more so that people can feel safer when making these choices. The stablecoin ecosystem isn't going to improve until people can start separating the wheat from the chaff. And we think our ratings are an important step in that direction of helping people to separate the stablecoin wheat from the stablecoin chaff.
Yeah, I guess somebody's got to put their head above the parapet in order to kind of just at least differentiate things. It can't all be seen as, oh, that's just crypto. It's all just terrible.
No. And one thing that we've learned, for me, this is learning. My other colleagues know much more about the cryptocurrency ecosystem. But just learning just what a great variety there is of governance quality and governance methods across the 15 coins we're rating. That just gives us a sense that, we're used to seeing governance quality in corporations, in banks. This is porting over, obviously, into the world of stablecoins. Some teams are better and some teams are worse. Some rules are better, some rules are worse. So it's time to take a stand. When it comes to cars, you can say, well, there are a lot of nice cars out there, but Consumer Reports has to get out there and say, no, these ones are a lot more likely to make it to 200,000 miles. Mm-hmm. That's our job at Blue Chip.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Actually, I just have a follow-up on that. So, I think within crypto, it may or may not be true, but we're about to see probably a proliferation of stablecoins. We're going to see probably a long tail of stablecoins, and so Blue Chip coming out now, which is kind of heading it off at the pass, will at least be able to have an opinion or show the general public or more people some sort of rating for this long tail, which I do believe is coming. I think there's going to be a lot of people creating stablecoins.
Yeah, many people have been telling me this. I think this is a consensus view, right? So
yeah,
really, our hope is that our people will use our rating guidelines and our white paper to really start coming up with ratings on their own. Like, a lot of people will be able to, sophisticated readers who are willing to dive into the details will start being able to use the Smidge rating framework to get their own good, solid hunches about how new stablecoins would be rated. So, we're a team of 3. It's going to take us some time to get to every single coin out there. But just our rating guidelines are transparent enough that people should be able to use them to start getting a sense of what looks safer, what looks less safe.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I think Braden has the next question.
Could you touch, before we get to that, could you touch a little bit more on how you guys evaluate audits and, the wheat from the chaff of audits themselves?
Now, that's a case where we start getting into the accounting level details, where our ratings analyst, our ratings director, Vaidya, is the real expert. But really, it is a matter of looking at whether ratings are whether audits are credibly performed by third parties. And that's both audits of the assets and audits for decentralized coins of the underlying software when possible. So the audits, fortunately, Vaidya is a chartered accountant, and he brings an expertise to this that I, as an economist, hand wave away in economic models by saying some people are credible auditors. So, not every alleged audit is an audit, and Vaidya is making our judgment on which audits are credible.
Great. I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, it'd be great to have him on, I believe, in the future, on a future podcast. So I come at this from the economics perspective. Our ratings director comes at this from an accounting perspective. Those two dialects, they're two different ways of looking at business problems, and are both important.
Great. I think I would love to do that too. But in terms of like the next topic, I think this is one people think of immediately when they hear of a stablecoin rating agency. So how do you think about the contrast between DeFi's decentralized ethos and a stablecoin rating agency, which naturally would be thought of more as a centralized entity? How do you address those skeptics in DeFi?
Well, basically, I mean, DeFi presents problems that are very much the problems of democracy. They're really problems of what we at George Mason call public choice. So, you know, so finding out whether we've all seen this, where DAOs, decentralized coins, are often exploited by clever insiders who know how to exploit the voting mechanism to raid the treasury. And this is something that economists and political scientists have studied how democratic voting methods are manipulable and exploitable. They've been studying this for centuries, right? And DAOs, decentralized coins, are a new application of this same perennial problem where democracy is no cure for the problems of human governance. Elites alone are not our problem. The masses can create plenty of problems on their own, whether we call that democracy or a DAO. And so part of what we're evaluating is in the DAOs, when we're evaluating decentralized coins, is how easy is it for a sophisticated insider or outsider to exploit the decentralized method of governance. So this is something that every decentralized coin has to wrestle with. Robert Michels, the great political sociologist, had an iron law of oligarchy. He said that no matter how democratic you say an organization is, it's going to be controlled by a few insiders. This is probably going to be true for the world of decentralized coins for quite some time to come. And that doesn't mean that decentralization is a fraud or a failure. It just means we have to recognize there's usually only going to be a few folks who are having disproportionate influence in any DAO's decision-making process. So protecting against exploitation in those settings is really important. Some can do it and some can't. That shows up in our ratings, I will say. I will say the one who reads our ratings will see that coming up quite within an hour of reading, people will figure that out.
So you would say that it kind of helps coordinate the like an established method of assigning qualitative understanding to stablecoins.
I think that's a fair way to sum it up. I mean, every person, each individual is going to be making their own personal rating about a coin, right? You have to decide for yourself which ones look safer and which looks unsafe. The three of us together, the blue chip team, we're making our own judgment about which kinds of decentralization seem to be credible and which seem to be highly vulnerable to exploitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. I might follow up a bit on that later, but just to move on, you're in a non-profit venture. So how do you hope to get your funding? Who would you like funding from? And how do you set up a funding framework which avoids conflicts of interests? Obviously, if Tether, for example, gave you $5 million as a gesture of goodwill, then people might see that in a slightly bad way.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're established as a nonprofit, and we depend on donations. And one way that we maintain our independence and our credibility is because we've already come up with a framework. I mean, really, we were circulating this months ago. We were getting input from both our formal advisors and from a broader community of folks. And so our ratings guidelines are already written down. So it would be and it's transparent enough with actually a set of details on how to rate a particular coin that would really make it hard to just go ahead and start handing out, doing a bunch of grade inflation or handing out grades for favors. So the system's already there. People can call us out if they think that somebody's getting an inflated grade. Another way to do it is to have a wide variety of donors from a wide variety of backgrounds, not just people who are actually issuing stable coins, but people from other parts of the financial community who are just interested in the ecosystem. So when one looks at the donors on our website, you'll see folks who are operating stable coins and folks who are interested in the ecosystem more generally. And that wide variety of donors, I mean, I live in Washington, D.C. I've worked in the think tank world. I know that one of the ways that think tanks preserve their independence is having a wide variety of donors so that any one donor you can walk away from. Somebody felt like cutting us a $5 million check. I mean, that's more than, I mean, we're a small team. We run light. So that's just not the kind of thing that's of interest to us. that's going to change our worldview. I can say that between myself being an older tenured professor, I have a certain kind of independence. My much younger colleagues are interested in their reputation and building their careers that can last for decades. And so those reputation incentives, economists know that reputation incentives help keep people on the straight and narrow. And I think that's going to be a powerful force. My team really wants to succeed, and we want a brand that people will respect. That's where we get our value from. I think that's going to help people believe that we're going to be an independent organization for a very long time to come.
Okay, yeah, great. I was going to have a later question, but it's probably a good follow-up to that. I was going to say all the best things like some sort of judgment over other systems need to have skin in the game in order to have their reputation count for something when they're saying something's good or bad. And so therefore, ultimately, for you guys, it's ultimately professional reputation, and the future of their reputation is at stake if they.
Yeah, I think that's the way much of academia works too, right? These reputational concerns are important, even when there's no dollar and cents being measured, right? One can imagine creating some kind of portfolio of stable coins based around our ratings and reward us with that, some kind of sophisticated incentive scheme. But it's just much better to have the world look at us and say, wow, these guys are really trying hard. Their system looks really transparent. It makes sense because I read their white paper, and it seems like it's the way a reasonably prudent, informed person would set this up. Those kind of reputational concerns just do a lot of work. That's much of how scientific innovation works in the real world, right? I mean, Newton didn't do it for the money, right? Neither did Adam Smith. So,
very true, very true. Okay, great. Thank you.
I apologize for any wind if you guys hear that in the background here. So there's a lot of talk in crypto about real-world assets and how they are the next breakthrough because they link the traditional finance system and are less self-referential. So it's obviously very very important, but regulation definitely comes into play more with these real-world assets. What's your view on regulation? Do you think how do you think the SEC clamped down recently, and so that's in the U.S. and then also MiCA in the EU is going to affect this space? How they are going to?
This is a good question, right? So a lot of coins, I mean, depending on how you're defining real-world assets, right? Many of the coins that we're already evaluating are, backed by U.S. Treasuries, or at least they claim to be backed by U.S. Treasuries and other financial assets. Some are backed by say that they're backed by real-world assets like, physical gold, right? So, but there's always this legal problem, right? You're buying or selling something on the internet, you're wondering, is it really connected to a product in the real world? We all know that under the traditional 19th century gold standard, U.S. banks and the U.S. government alike, they were not 100% backed by gold. And in many cases, it was impractical for people to get their hands on the gold. So claims of real world assets quickly become legal questions, right? Questions of durable, believable contracts, both questions of whether the terms of service of the stablecoin are clearly enforceable and whether it's being run in a country where you can believe the rule of law. So once we get into the world of real world assets, we're back in the world of traditional legal systems where problems of trust, credibility, high transaction costs come to the fore. So, this is something that every system has to wrestle with. So some coins will probably be able to succeed completely decentralized and on chain. Some will succeed through quite stringent legal processes, and some in turn, this shows up in our ratings, some in turn will get an extra dose of credibility because they're overseen by a credible regulator. So it's strange to some who've been following the world of cryptocurrency for over a decade now. It might seem a little weird that stablecoins are coming back to asking governments to give them the good housekeeping seal of approval, but sometimes that's what works.
Yep. Sometimes if you want to be enormous, then you've got to ask the big guys' permission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's life. Although, decentralized stablecoins, it could be argued, because they can't really be blacklisted, it's very difficult to stop them being created. But I can understand governments saying, well, you can't just make $1 billion out of nowhere. I'm not having that, because I'm liable all of a sudden somehow for that. Somebody's going to complain that they don't have $1 billion all of a sudden. So I can see the issues that governments have with this, because they like to control the issuance of fiat, obviously.
But the second point you make there is really important, right? Which is that in a democratic society, or even a halfway democratic society, citizens get upset when their money isn't there, and they tell their politicians, do something about this. So the U.S. government keeps finding out that the public demands that uninsured assets be insured. In the 2008 financial crisis, it was these money market mutual funds, which were officially, very clearly not insured by the government. And yet, once there was a panic on them, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury were under enormous political pressure to guarantee those assets in order to prevent bank runs. So we saw a version of this with Silicon Valley Bank just a little bit ago, right? Again, uninsured depositors being insured. And these are democratic pushes, more or less. You can push it one way or the other. But in broad terms, people take it for granted. People put pressure on governments whenever their money's not there. So, and this is this is something that democratic governments have found very difficult to resist. So,
yeah, so it might follow that if a shady stablecoin player gained a large market share and people were trading with it, shopping with it, treating it as normal cash, and then all of a sudden it wasn't there, the pressure might be on the governments to bail them out.
And I don't want to have to go so far as to say genuine, like shady. The word shady, right, in a way assumes the answer just a little more than we need to, right? Some of these stablecoin projects are going to be a lot like the countries that suffered in the '97 Asian financial crisis. Prosperous countries, reasonably competent government, people who, at least as far as we can tell, have good intentions, people who aren't just taking the government's reserves and hiding them in Swiss bank accounts, like pretty well run projects that just aren't well run enough are subject to runs. And this is a problem both for nations running fiat currencies and for stable coins that aren't quite well managed enough.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting. Might be interesting to see the. So do you touch on that vulnerability in your ratings?
Oh yes, I mean, this is where a lot of this comes from. So a coin that's just a little bit under collateralized, right, or just that can put one into a category where you could go from an A to a B plus very quickly, just with a little bit, not quite enough collateralization. If you're headquartered in a country where your legal system just isn't quite good enough, so that in a panic the contractual guarantees are just too difficult to enforce. If there's a person on your team who was in a scandal quite a few years ago and you thought it wasn't a big deal, but bluechip.org thinks it is a big deal, these are going to hurt. That's going to show up in your ratings. So there are quite a few things where, like, what some people might think of as small little sins are big enough to really affect a stablecoin's rating. Okay.
And I guess because things move fairly quickly in crypto, and governance methods might change, but people might be brought into the team, people might leave the team. You're probably going to. Well, I'm assuming you're planning to be on top of the market, as it were, to be inside changes.
There's going to be renewed ratings. We're going to be revisiting from time to time. With perhaps we'll get a little bit bigger team at some point in the future and be able to speed up that process. But between the pressure to cover more coins and the pressure to revise updates of the coins we're already covering, that's a lot of work. So we could use a bigger team, and so I hope people support our project if they find it useful. We show on the website how to donate to us either with crypto or in traditional methods. So it'd be great to have a few more ratings analysts to help us with this project of keeping up to date in the world of stablecoins.
And is it your opinion that there will be more regulation on stablecoins, or do you think that the government aren't particularly bothered because it's quite a small market at the moment? Or do you think they would like to get in quickly, small, to stop it getting too big and too problematic?
I mean, one might think I know more about this because I live 2 blocks from the U.S. Capitol, and I used to work as a Senate staffer. But in a way, your guess is as good as mine. I think we both have the same guess, which is that the U.S. government is committed to doing some kind of serious stablecoin regulation, partly because there are substantial amounts of financial flows, and they're probably worried about something untoward that could happen with under collateralized or poorly managed stablecoin projects. Of course, the European Union is always in the mood to regulate financial products as well as more or less everything else. So it just seems like there's going to be a strong presumption across at least the Atlantic that stablecoins are going to come under important regulatory scrutiny, and they should come under important governance scrutiny, whether that's formal government regulation or just organizations like Blue Chip candidly evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of various coins. So it really is a good time for people to be clear and straightforward about how they're regulating and how they're evaluating various stablecoin projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'll be interesting because the USA has kept itself separate from everyone else because they're effectively global debt. But the EU has come up with a framework. It's documented. It looks like it doesn't touch DeFi very much, but it at least sets out some guidelines. The UK, where I am, they're going down a slightly different route because they can, but it does seem that the UK and Europe are a little less afraid of this, or rather more, let's just say, take advantage of this kind of new electronic form of currency. Whereas I think the US is just afraid of the whole world collapsing around it because they don't know what's going on. The other side of it is it takes the US so long to write this legislation and get it through that they can make a decision a year ago and say, this is the way we're going to go. You might not see it for 4 years anyway.
Yeah, the U.S. system was designed to be slow, and it managed to stay slow.
That's definitely the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question we have is generally, what type of improvements do you wish to see in the stablecoin space? What I hate to say traditional structures, but we live in the real world. What kind of things are missing from crypto and stablecoins that you would like to see that non-crypto people would be confident about to say, okay, that crypto thing, it doesn't look like a scam anymore. It looks like I could use it. A bit like people were really reticent to pay by credit card with Amazon really early on because oh my God, A, it was really difficult, and B, oh my, where is this money going? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it really does. I mean, audits are the first thing, right? If you're not willing to find on the list of conspiracy theories out there aren't really a ton of conspiracy theories about the big accounting firms being frauds, right? So those folks can come in and check your stuff out and make a statement that will help your ratings. I would say that's an important part. When we look at our D ratings, governance is an important factor in what's holding these folks back. And so it's not the collateralization. It's not the backing. It's not the ability to hold the peg in short time horizons that's holding back coins and getting them D ratings. It's different forms of failures of governance. Sometimes that's failures of audits. Sometimes it's failures of decentralized governance, where the voting system looks quite manipulable. And governance. It's time to move beyond thinking about just the collateralization and start thinking about whether your stablecoin project is governed in a credible, transparent, high quality way.
Yeah. So okay. So basically, mirroring larger financial institutions, just to be able to say, look, these guys have given us a nod of approval, and they're good enough for a $4 trillion market. So you might not trust them very much, but at least they said yes to us.
Yeah, I mean, people will see that there are some decentralized coins that don't need as much of the traditional management structures that do get good ratings under the blue chip economic safety rating framework. So it's worth looking at those as well. Those are models that are worth thinking about. So one doesn't have to be a fiat coin backed by US treasuries and controlled and supervised by people wearing boring suits in order to get a good rating through blue chip. Yeah. So there are multiple paths. There's room to, I mean, I can't say we're going to let 1,000 flowers bloom, but there's at least room for 5 or 6 flowers to bloom.
Yeah. So in effect, on the DeFi side, then, if you've got a really well audited smart contracts, that's effectively good management because the smart contract is the deciding factor, and as long as the mechanism is a good one, then
and yeah, difficult to exploit for both insiders and outsiders. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Understood. Is there anything else that you're thinking of that would partner well with what's going on currently?
Well, yeah, I just hope that regulators and would-be legislators of stablecoins take a look at the SMID rating framework and take a look at our scoring guidelines to get a sense of how the messages of basic economics do have to be translated into the world of crypto in important ways. A one-size-fits-all approach will not work because decentralized and centralized coins work differently. Fiat and crypto-backed coins work differently. So there's a lot of room for, I hope that regulators and would-be legislators learn to understand the nuances here. And the SMID framework is going to give them, I think, some insights they probably aren't getting anywhere else.
Interesting. Yeah. And of course, you're in about the right location for them to come and ask.
Yeah, I'm always glad to walk over once I'm back in the U.S. Yeah.
Okay. Over to you, Braden.
Okay, so you've touched on this a few different times already, but maybe asking more explicitly, what would your ideal stablecoin basket look like? But maybe let's just say 10 years from now. What are you thinking?
Oh, 10 years from now. Wow. Like, when I think of the promise of stable coins, I hope for over collateralized crypto backed coins that can be run in a completely decentralized manner. Now, when they're that over collateralized, it will be probably difficult for them to for a coin like that to actually have a high yield. So it'd probably be used for high frequency transactions or short term investments. But part of the promise, like, this is me being in my utopian mode, not my day-to-day user mode. But when I think of the utopian mode of what stable coins could offer that's new under the sun and not just a reinvention of the wheel, it's going to be something that's a crypto-backed coin that's algorithmic, trustable, high speed, efficient, low transaction cost, and it would probably be backed by a variety of other forms of on-chain assets, so that we don't have to get into the legal problems of trying to integrate on-chain, off-chain assets into the framework. So that's really like I said, some crypto-backed projects work well, and maybe increasing computer power, even perhaps powered by artificial intelligence, can help increase the efficiency of these transactions so that transaction costs will get really low and really trustable. That's really what I'd like to see. So I don't think that's going to be, like I said, with the interest costs of so much collateralization, the foregone wealth, not many coins are going to be able to do that for long-term investments, but for high-frequency trading, for clearing rapid payments and business-to-business transactions, something like that could work very well.
Interesting. This is not something I've personally done too much very, very deep thinking on to understand what they mean by this. But I've heard of people, currency being backed by, compute power and GPUs, and I don't necessarily, perfectly understand that. But I feel like, that does make sense to a degree.
At that level of generalization, I have to say I don't understand it either. So I'd need a white paper on that to dive into more detail.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there has been a recent white paper on using crypto or stable coins, at least within internal clearing I think even the US has talked about this. So this is just interbank clearing. And so
yeah, that seems it does seem quite plausible, right? It's that the details of my dissertation that I was looking at that how the U.S. clears those kind of payments on a very high frequency basis, and they're already transacting a lot of purely electronic transactions in order to clear checks every day in the U.S. So one can imagine scenarios where crypto turns out to be an easier way. That hasn't been the case yet, but it's not impossible that happens in the future.
Yeah, I think the EU has their regulation for this kind of clearing. They've had a go, I think, and the smart contracts actually mean that you can try and send the money, and then they verify, or they don't verify and take it all away from you. So that sounds very central banky to me, but they're at least looking into it, and let's face it. There was always a lot of fat in banking of people who were just part of the process and didn't really add much value, and that's getting stripped away. And if it can be done electronically and safely, then there's a buck in it for them. So you would expect them to be looking at this kind of thing.
Well, I suspect that it's still international B2B transactions that are a business to business transactions that are an open opportunity for stablecoin settlement. Companies, large and small, complain about the high costs of international financial transactions. And so any place transaction costs are high, that's a space for stablecoins to move in with the right kind of innovation. So it's a wave of the future, perhaps. Maybe it always will be a wave of the future, always just beyond the horizon. But it certainly seems like an opportunity. If stablecoins start if the ecosystem improves in quality, then there's a chance for that.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I send money to Norway, and it costs me an absolute fortune to do it.
It's ridiculous, right? So yeah,
it's crazy. Wise, the transfer company, they started off. I think they're recognised as a bank. So they applied for banking licenses, but their fees are significantly lower than a normal bank. So they're already, they don't use stable coins, but it doesn't take a genius to say that, Wise already have all of that infrastructure in place. Why wouldn't they be looking at using a stable coin, which is even cheaper? So yeah, I guess we have to watch this space. But that, for me, international remittances is a great place for stable coins.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And, B2B, of course, international remittances are important at the individual level and improves lives all around the world. Business to business transactions are a huge, much bigger opportunity. The fact that other big players haven't moved in there is a sign that it must be very hard to do. Getting some regulatory clarity on this could be a big part of making that possible.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's ended our standard bunch of questions, I think. Unless, Braden, you've got something that you want to follow up from earlier?
No, I'm good, but thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, we can, I guess, if you've got time, Garett, we could, if anyone has a question from the audience, we could take questions. So I guess, I think Braden's in charge of allowing people in. So if you have a question, I think it's raise your hand, isn't it, on Twitter Spaces? Or do, I guess, apply to be a speaker, or send us a text or something. So if anyone's got any questions they want to ask about stablecoin ratings or anything that Garett could tell you about, then please ask now. Don't think we're getting anything. Everybody's obviously so full of information.
Yes.
We've covered everything so beautifully. There are no more questions to be asked.
I've got one question. What do you think of the importance of this stable summit that's coming up next week?
Well, it's happening in Paris. So I'm going to be there speaking. It really is focused on the technical elements of stablecoins. So it's designed. This conference in Paris is really designed, as far as I can tell, front to back, to be a hype-free, technically focused conference on stablecoins. So, I mean, it feels to me like it's a sign of maturity of the industry and of the ecosystem that people are having meetings like this where the hype is dialed down and the engineering and practitioner excellence element is dialed up. So if folks are out there in Paris, I'm glad to meet with them. So that's apparently it's happening just before ETHCC, and it's again, the people that I've seen on the panel so far are people who are talking technical stuff and wanting to make the system work better. So I'm glad to be part of that. So.
Yeah, it's like another. It's kind of like Blue Chip, where it helps with coordination of these different people to in this one subject arena to talk and coordinate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to talking with the folks. A couple folks have reached out to me already on through email or on LinkedIn or whatever, and it's you know, there's a stereotype on Capitol Hill that like the people on the House are the ruffians and the people on the Senate are more like the grown-ups. And to stereotype it a bit, maybe this event is more like the Senate side. So one will see. Time will tell. So.
Yeah, it's amazing.
See what comes out of that. Yeah. Okay, well, if people don't have questions, then thank you so much for your time and being part of this venture. We're really looking forward to seeing how Blue Chip shapes the way stablecoins are viewed and used. It's obviously an integral part of that. For those that want to know more, where can people find Blue Chip and how do they get in touch with you if they want to know more? And if you want to give a shout out to the other team members, then that's great.
Yeah, so we launch in 8 minutes at bluechip.org, just spelled blue chip, no spaces, bluechip.org. On Twitter, we are at bluechip_org. But again, our website, bluechip.org, should work great on a variety of formats. And if people, our team of three is myself, Garett Jones, our CEO, Benjamin Levitt, and our ratings director, Vaidya Palasena, better known on Ethereum better known on Twitter by his gnome Dethereum. And all the three of us are the team. We're the board. If people have feedback for us, feel free to contact us on Twitter, email. We want to make Blue Chip better so that we can help the stablecoin ecosystem perform better.
Fantastic. So in 7 minutes, head over to bluechip.org and have a good read through of everything. Send your feedback through and share the good news.
Thanks a lot. Great. Thanks for having me here. This has been great conversation.
Thank you very much, Garett. Thank you.
Thank you, Garett.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, guys. Thanks for listening. And let people know about this. It'll obviously be a recording. So if you think that people would benefit from this, let them know. Thanks, guys, for turning up.
See you later, guys.
See you guys. Bye.